Stafford Airport Authority, Thursday, December 16, 2021. And the first order of business is going to be the minutes for approval of our regular meeting of November 18th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes. Those minutes are approved. In spite of the written agenda that we've made as a public matter and generally do, we're going to let Pastor Roberts speak for 3 minutes because he has to go, and this is a one-time deviation from our regular agenda order. Sir, if you would like to address us, please do.
I don't want to be the exception here. Either we all get to speak, or I'll wait
Oh, okay.
until everybody else.
Fine, no problem. We'll move on to staff reports. Mike Dunn, Executive Director.
Shelley, you want to go first?
Sure. Kathy said that I was gonna send you the financial reports yesterday. I apologize I didn't get those out. I'll send those to the board tomorrow, so you do not have those in front of you tonight. As we reported at the last meeting, we are in the middle of a software conversion. It's going pretty smoothly. I just wanted to feel really comfortable with the financial reports before I handed them out. For November, we did have pretty good operating revenue and expenses stayed within budget. Parking revenue for November, which goes in line with the passenger revenue that Zach will talk to later, was extremely high for a November month, higher than any November we've had in history. Well, since parking's only a few years, but our enplanements were. So we had 102,000 in parking revenue in November, which actually shows up on the December report due to the timing of it, but just wanted to mention that it was pretty incredible, the revenue that we saw in November. The parking lot reflected that as well. All of our building leases are on target, other revenues are on target. Landing fees are currently 20% over budget, compared to budget, obviously. And cash position is sitting pretty clean. Commissioner Myers and I spoke for a moment before the meeting. We're progressing pretty well with the state and the FAA getting our payments run through the programs through the system, so that's going pretty well. We did complete our employee benefits review and open enrollment this month. We do have a resolution in front of you tonight for dental insurance. That's something that we previously self-funded, so you've not approved a resolution for dental insurance before. We've been watching that the past few years as our employee numbers come up and as our claims come up, families grow. That resolution is to contract with Delta Dental. I actually did put it in your binder. It's the very last page in your binder. It's the memo, and then the resolution is part of the regular business. So you'll see that if we continue to self-fund, we expect that the cost next year would be over $50,000, and we got a quote from Delta Dental to give us a very nice price at total. I have it estimated at $38,000. I put a board resolution not to exceed 39. We do that 38. May fluctuate. We have a few new employees that are just coming onto the plan. Actually went on the plan before open enrollment. So we were able, as we talked last month, we did see an increase in our health insurance. Therefore, we are not changing making any increase to employees on the dental cost, and we are gonna see a decrease in our dental expense, so that we were able to hold as it was. And then we did have a couple improvements to our FSA plan, which is flexible savings account, sometimes referred to as a section 125 plan. We're going with a provider that's based, I mean, according to our standards media, the policy takes, like, for health insurance, it's the first of the following month. So if you start, there's a small delay just based on the way that they fund it or the way that they program it. Dental is the first of the, it was the first of the second month, but actually that's a good question for Delta, because if they process it as quickly as, Blue Cross, they'd be eligible the first of the next month. So.
Any other questions for Shelley? Zach? Okay.
All right, we'll start with the cargo numbers for the month of November. We had a actual pretty crazy month in November. We saw a 40% increase over November of 2020. For the third time in our history, and this is the only third time we've ever done this, we broke 300 million pounds of landed weight for the airport. Previous two were the December of 2020 and December of 2019 are the only other times we've ever done this. So it just speaks to the overall increase that we're seeing. Like I said, the month over, November 2020 versus November 2021, I was actually quite shocked at our growth. I knew it was going to be high. Didn't realize it was going to be that high, which puts us at 25% year over year. These are just some pictures of showing some of our main carriers, UPS. This is a Turkish carrier, ACT Cargo Airlines. They're actually contracted now with DSV. DSV is one of our main shipping partners that's using Rockford on a fairly regular basis. I mean, they are the third largest freight forwarder in the world, and they've recently contracted 2 aircraft with ACT, and they're operating it out of Rockford pretty regularly. And then this is just a picture of UPS and Prime Air. Both those, here right now with 3 or 4 aircraft, I've been sitting here. Just the constant movement of these 2 companies as we've been growing the last few months as we get into closer and closer to Christmas. And then Shelley mentioned our passenger numbers. Another good thing for us at the backside of the pandemic so far, this will be the first month of passenger growth over 2019 numbers since February of 2020, since right before the shutdown started to happen. We actually saw 1,900 more enplanements in the month of November compared to November of 2019, and it was honestly, it was like Shelley mentioned, on our parking, it was one of our largest Novembers in the last 6 or 7 years. So it was good to see that back, and the passenger travel start to recover. We've seen that over the last 5 to 6 months, where we're getting closer and closer to closing the gap to 2019 numbers, and we actually exceeded them for the first time here in November of 2020 or 21. Sorry. Another story we've been waiting for a little while. During this past about a year and a half, the state of Illinois has been developing and updating its economic impact statement to the aviation system. Those numbers have been released to us, and the impact is dramatic compared to what we saw. The last study was done in 2010 and came out in 2011. These numbers were compiled in 2020 and are finally being released now. Just pull up for us. Pass this now. Pull up this way. So our economic impact is at $4.7 billion from the airport to the region. We are supporting 21,476 jobs. Labor income of 1.4 billion, with value added of 2.6 billion. Go back to our presentation from our numbers from. We'll go back to what those numbers were in 2011. You'll see regional jobs in 2011 at 5,383. 4 times multiplier, 21,476. Same thing on airport, 1,900 to 8,000, and their economic impact at 4.7 billion. And you got to go back and look at these slides on the actual region, and they'll show you kind of our route map of where Rockford is affecting. What do we connect into? How does our cargo touch not just the region but the entire country? they do a good job of, this is a study conducted through Kingley-Horn, through the state of Illinois, kind of bringing this together and showing us, how Rockford's impact is, regional, not just regionally, nationally as well. And it kind of ties into our Region 2, the economic impact for the entire region, so Northwest Illinois down to the south suburbs, this Region 2 is 8.1 billion, which we're 4.7 billion of that number. With the air cargo number of $3 billion, that is, the vast majority of that is Rockford. There is another airport that's in Region 2, that's Moline, the Quad City International Airport. They have almost no air freight right out there, so the vast majority of that is directly related to Rockford. We are the third largest economic impact in the state of Illinois for airports. O'Hare, obviously the largest, $37 billion of economic impact. Midway at $8.5 billion economic impact. Below us is Mid-America at number 4. That's Scott Air Force Base at $3.1 billion. So the growth that we've seen here in the last decade, you got to look back at our history of what's happened. AAR showing up, a large international company showing up and setting up shop in Rockford in those 2 hangars with 400 mechanics. That's a big ad. You have Amazon showing up in 2016, and then with their 1,500 employees and that new cargo business related to that. And then you have UPS really re-emphasizing Rockford in 2017 by closing Des Moines and relocating that base or the secondary air operation to Rockford. They're reinvesting in their facility. They've invested close to $100 million inside that facility in the last 3 years to increase the throughput and just the overall growth and importance. Now the other part, when we talk about jobs with air cargo, landing the airplane is the easiest part. The jobs really start to trickle down in the region really from that point on. You have the people touching the aircraft and handling the aircraft. You have the warehousing and sortation going on. You have the downstream trucking that gets in there, and then the induced impacts related to just the manufacturing, medical supplies, everything else that how it reaches out through there. So we knew the numbers were going to be significantly larger than what they were in 2011, but quite honestly did not expect 4.7 billion. So go back a little bit, and then kind of just look back at like we talked about last month. Just kind of some of our products, what are we seeing move through Rockford? Some of our exports, medical instruments, computers, X-ray, motor vehicle parts, passenger vehicles, actual vehicles moving out of here through as part of our exports. And then by tonnage, same thing, medical instruments, auto parts, appliances, compressors, pumps, and more medical equipment, physicals. And then our imports, what are we bringing in? Cell phones, more medical devices, X-ray, and power supplies, and very similar to those X-ray apparatus and medical equipment. That's a lot of stuff that's very similar across the board with tonnage. But we also did in terms of total trade, we're just shy of 2.5 billion now through this calendar year. The month of October, which our data is, we don't have the November numbers yet. But we have the October numbers, and we're about $383 million in trade passed through the airport in the month of October. Just tying into some of the construction and operational items that have been going on. The midfield ramp, the new 6 parking positions that we started construction on in July. We have wrap construction on that. They'll be opening for operation next week. They're painted, ready to go. That's moving a lot of our large aircraft that we've been seeing operating on this side of the field between the airport terminals. They'll start moving into the midfield now to those ramps. But we are still overflowing. UPS is using this space between the 2 terminals every evening. But we've already started to see those 6 positions out over there that we're opening up. We're already starting to see 3 and 4 aircraft parked there pretty regularly. And then this time we're just ready for our first snowfall. That's the next wonderful thing that's on our list. That's it.
Zach, just a question about the employment. That is a big number. I think the board's familiar with the UPS and Amazon. What about some smaller private
Go back to that
entities?
spreadsheet.
Yeah, you're right.
So have we seen growth there? I know Emory was acquired a year or 2 ago, and
Yeah.
that certainly increased
So that's very good, yeah. So we always talk about UPS and Amazon and AR are the large employers in the growth we said, but we've seen a lot of growth in some of our smaller businesses as well. You know, we talked about Emory, 10 years ago, 65, 75 employees, they're up over 400 now, and they're growing rapidly. You have Chronos Aviation. Chronos showed up on the field about 2017. They mostly focus on corporate aircraft, but they also do a lot of stuff for DoD, special missions, a lot of government contracts. They showed up with about 20 employees, but they've grown to just shy of 60 in about 4 years. And then we have another really good example is Code One Aviation. The board did a deal with Nathan Jones back in 2010 to lease him an airport hangar. I believe it's 12 employees that start back right around the same time period. Nathan's over 80 employees. I mean, he's done a heck of a job growing that business and increasing it. And a lot of these kids that are in our these facilities are coming through RBC as well, which is another entry on the airport that we kind of forget to talk about. But yeah, they started that new facility at RBC in 2015. It's feeding a lot of our local employers on the field, so these small businesses that are growing rapidly as well.
I'll just inject, a couple of years ago, Tom, you were on the board, we came to you, looking for a deal to be made for Code One. And at the time, we asked, Nathan, who owns Code One, how many employees would he be having? And he said 12. And they're up to what?
Almost 80.
80.
Yeah.
Now, Zach, you've showed us statistics of $4.7 billion. That's $4.7 billion per year,
Yeah.
not divided by 10 years.
No, that's 4.7 based on our 2020 numbers alone. That does not take into account any growth that's happened since fourth quarter of 2020.
Thank you. A remarkably good report.
Well, this, for the commissioners, I would suggest is a report card in response to the investments that you've allowed us to make out here. And I guess I was shocked when I remember in 2010, 2011, we were 900 and some million, and I was very upset that we couldn't get over a billion at that point. So to see these numbers, outstanding. And there's just a lot of jobs comes with this.
Okay.
Anything else?
No.
Conclude your report.
That concludes.
Okay, we'll move on to old business. Any old business? Any new business? Okay. Public comments. We've had 4 people sign up. I'd like to call on Mr. We'll call the Reverend first. Pastor Roberts, would you like to speak?
Actually, Craig Campbell might be good at the end.
Okay, well, is it okay with you if we run the meeting that way?
Yeah.
Okay, please, sir. Yeah.
I've got a brief presentation, if you could, hopefully we could pass these out down the line. Just make my comments brief. My name is Craig Campbell. I'm a community historian. And I want to thank the Greater Rockford Airport Authority and commissioners for allowing me to speak to you today. This afternoon, or this evening, I'd like to make some brief comments about history and its legacy and its importance for public stewardship and community awareness. History plays a critical role in the understanding of how we develop as a community and nation. The study of history has a definite purpose and place in the life of the individual and the community. Its aim is to educate the mind of the present with information from the past in order to ensure a better present and a better future. I have a direct familial connection to the Chicago Rockford International Airport. In 1918, my paternal grandfather, Sterling D. Campbell, served as a YMCA instructor for the U.S. Army here at Camp Grant. If you go to the second page, you can see his picture. He's standing there on July 1918. He's the third person from the left standing on the steps of YMCA building number 4. Cammy understood his importance and significance in serving the country at that time, and so he wrote a very brief reminiscence about his experiences there. And in May of 1918, he wrote, "Took first shot in the arm for typhoid and paratyphoid and was vaccinated for smallpox. I remember how sick I was for a short time afterward. Played outdoor bowls quite hard right after being shot, which used left arm considerably, making it quite sore and me quite sick." I'm sure you can appreciate the irony and the historical significance of vaccinations then, and then the fact that 6 months later, the base would be confronted with the 1918-1919 influenza pandemic. And then almost 101 years later, history seems to repeat itself when we're confronted with the COVID-19 pandemic. The next photo on the back of that page is a picture of the officers, photo number 4, of the officers at Camp Grant, and they're standing in the Balboa Prairie Amphitheater. If you look carefully at the photograph, you can see a phalanx of soldiers to the far right, and they're separated from the rest of the troops positioned in the photo. Those are the African American soldiers who were stationed at Camp Grant. And as you know, in 1917, the U.S. Army segregated all African American personnel in whatever containment they were contained in. Lastly, I can show you the next photograph is of Clara Retzoff Peterson and Winfred Peterson. This is taken at McChesney Field, probably around 1920. Clara remembers that her parents would go to the Balboa Amphitheater, and she told me in an interview in September of 2005, my mother and father would always go out to Camp Grant for entertainment, the Bell Bowl, I think they called it. So everyone would sit around there, and the bottom was music, and they would sing, and they would just love to sit there all the time on the hill and listen to this music. And she says, and the name of the singer they loved most was Bob Daly. I'll never forget that. The last photograph I have is a picture of Camp Grant building decorated for Christmas between 1941 and 1945. And in the spirit of the season, I wish you all a warm and healthy holiday season and a prosperous new year. In conclusion, I congratulate the Airport Authority and the board on the success that they just indicated, and I wish them well in this future year. This extraordinary success in cargo operations reflects not only Airport Authority's commitment to state-of-the-art management and services, but the unique role the COVID-19 pandemic had on the global economy. The transformative worldwide effects of the pandemic has shown that nature is still the most powerful evolutionary force in human history. As directors and commissioners, I ask that you consider carefully the effects of your actions on the Rockford community and the nation. Please preserve the legacy of the Balboa Prairie for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Pastor Roberts, would you like to speak?
Jesse Crow Mermel.
Jim can go next. Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you tonight. We have heard from the airport that the midfield expansion is essential to economic development of Rockford, and that paving over an 8,000-year-old ancient prairie is necessary because of a planned development from 40 years ago. Well, Albert Einstein once said the significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level we were at when we created them. We are at a very different place now than we were at 40 years ago, and if we are to enact meaningful solutions to the problems we face, it's imperative that we abandon the mentality of economy over all else. When he visited the airport last month, Governor Pritzker said so himself. Because what good do jobs do for the community when they are union busting or Osha violating? When hardworking people are getting cancer from chemical exposure at their jobs, and ancient ecosystems are on the chopping block, the people of Rockford must ask themselves if the actions of the executive staff have their best interest in mind when voices of the community seem to go unheard. Climate change and biodiversity collapse are not a distant threat. The planet is heating up, and what we do now determines how hostile a climate our children and grandchildren are inheriting. The complex ecosystem of the Bellbowl Prairie is not only habitat to supporting biodiversity, but is actively drawing down carbon out of the atmosphere where it belongs, in the soil. Once the prairie is gone, it's gone. What you do now determines if endangered birds and insects will be sharing airspace with these cargo planes. And what you do now determines the safety of our workers, our community, our land, our water, and the very air we breathe. What needs to go extinct is the mindset of endless economic growth and the willful ignorance that created this mess we are in, not the rusty cat bumblebee. Your board still has the opportunity to review the outdated plans and implement alternative designs that show true sustainable innovation, allowing you to expand with the future in mind and save Bellbowl Prairie at the same time. Several such options have been shared with you, and the award of $3.6 million from the state of Illinois Rebuild Illinois Airport Capital Improvement Program to this airport is given for such forward thinking, something that will allow the prairie to coexist and a new road to be designed. When our president took office this past January, he issued the following words in his executive order 13990, restoring our country's commitment to the act as a nation for and by the people and to protect our nation's national heritage. Quote, our nation has an abiding commitment to empower our workers and communities, promote and protect our public health and the environment, and conserve our national treasures and monuments, places that secure our national memory. In carrying out this charge, the federal government must be guided by the best science and to prioritize both environmental justice and the creation of well-paying union jobs necessary to deliver these goals.
Okay, thank you for your comments. We're going to need time as expected. And finally, from the group, Pastor Roberts, would you like to speak? Share.
Thank you. Whose time is this?
We are. Apple iPhones and
Anyway, Jim Roberts, I've been pastor in Rockford for 48 years, actually. I was in Emmanuel Lutheran for 36. I've been an advocate for Midtown, I've been an advocate for the police chaplaincy, interfaith understanding, the clergy association. I'm doing courageous conversations with the library and with the city. I was very much behind Transform Rockford when Mike Shablaski was head of that. I'm telling you, I'm an advocate for the city. I'm serious about this city. I think the airport has helped Rockford take off. I've watched it grow. My son works here over 20 years. All right, I'm in this. I got skin in this. I appreciate your work. Boards can be boring. Very hard, very tiresome even. So I do appreciate your work. But I am an advocate for the airport and this expansion. This is very impressive stuff up here on the screen. I did not, but I also love the creation, and I love the what's under our feet. I did not know about this prairie. I didn't. I just saw it there on the map, but it's not indicated. But the prairies are quiet and hardly make a sound. When you walk on them, you don't realize their story. When you drive on them, you don't realize their beauty. When you plow them up, you don't realize their gifts. And when you pave them over, they are gone without a sound. You have a voice and are advocates for this airport, but you also can have a voice and be an advocate for the prairie. I was not an advocate for the prairie, but I am learning how to be an advocate for a busy, loud airport and a very busy, quiet prairie. The prairie's getting very much press. The Chicago Tribune, other papers, national TV outlets, Center for Biological Diversity, and all these other national organizations are looking at this prairie. It's had a lot of press. I am afraid with all our work, over 48 years of working myself on this, and all of you working for the Rockford and for the airport, I'm afraid we're about to take a hit. So I've talked to the mayor, I've talked to other religious leaders. I'm afraid right now the optics for Spruce City are not going to be good, because we can have an amazing airport and expansion, and we can also have a very quiet, very significant, very important, irreplaceable prairie. We can do both. And by doing both, we can get some great press, free press, and we won't be the city. Spruce City paves over the prairie. I mean, that's not what we want.
Okay, Pastor, thank you very much. Those comments are well taken. We have Tim Schaefer. Yes, sir.
I'm gonna stay here, like I said, I got the bad knee, so I don't want to
Sure,
get
that's
turned into
fine.
on somebody's
That's
lap. The topic, we've been talking about for the last few months is the Osha retention records and some of the stuff related to that. Recently, we did have some UPS workers reach out to us, and we had a meeting with them. And they were asked for us to get some information from the airport if possible, or they may have to go through federal OSHA, since it's not a facility that'd be under state OSHA. But getting back to the medical and screening, we were glad last week that you guys did put the new policy in place in regard to exposure retention and things on that line. Not sure if that's your full hazardous communication program that you guys are having. I think it's going to probably be completed by the end of the month. But within that, the question is, what happens when somebody's exposed to a chemical? I sent Mr. Lester and Mr. Cicero a OSHA form 3162. It's a 40-page pamphlet that shows what happens when somebody is exposed to certain chemicals out there. Things that we would say that we were exposed to was asbestos, benzene, suspect carcinogens. That's a whole different category, even if something's like AFFF foam that we talk a lot about. Formaldehyde, we used to burn a lot of buses here on the airport for our training, so we'd light up buses, and there's a lot of studies on a lot of this different stuff that you're exposed to. Basically, within this OSHA 3162, they have a series of tests that are required. Like if you have a worker today, and we hope you do implement this in your program, if somebody is exposed to some of these things on the list, the airport should do annual medical testing for them. Then once they leave the airport, termination, and that's determined by which chemical they're exposed to. That could be under the occupational physician. The test they can do is x-rays, blood draws. That's what we're actually asking for the old employees. Since some of us, like I said, were never given any testing, any information, we're asking that you do that now. The other thing I want to bring up, when you guys do your hazardous communication program, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, they do have a program, which I did send you guys today, that you can go there. They'll send you a free evaluation. They'll give you information, certain things on the airport that would be considered a risk and how to address those. On the UPS angle, which would be pretty easy, whether the airport would require different companies or maybe work with UPS, the issue that we're having, or the people talk to us are having, is they're worried about the APU or the jet fumes while they're out working on the ramp. Some told stories where, not too recent past, they would have tugs inside the building running, exposing that chemical to those workers inside an enclosed thing. So there is a company that you can put on just a device on a couple workers that would measure them to see what they're actually exposed to. You have a lot of workers out here, so it's something that you can definitely do for a safety issue. As much as you want jobs, you want things like that, you also don't want the people to end up with cancer later on for their time here. And there is also these, monitors that you can hook up in certain areas on the airport. And, that would actually give you a reading. And Mr. Lester was good enough to send me the last environmental assessment report. And it was about 490 pages, and there's certain ones in there that cover air monitoring, but it seems like from the best we can tell, they're off-site facilities, so an actual worker here that's here every night on the ramp for 4 or 5 hours wherever they work, that would show what their exposure limits are, and then you could kind of make a safety assessment off of that. Because you do want to keep every place safe here, and I want to say Merry Christmas to everybody, and congratulations to Airport, because we watched this place grow when there was no UPS, no nothing. Mr. Dunn was here, I think, towards the end of our time, and it's truly impressive, but even like with the Bell Bowl, maybe you guys are some very smart individuals up there. If you could kind of maneuver around, you got some very smart people. We respect what you do. Maybe take a little extra time and work around there and see what you come up with. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your comments. I believe that concludes public comments this evening. And we will now move on to resolutions and ordinances. Commissioner Shabowski, you do the honors.
Motion to approve resolution 21-71, repealing the resolution if it was ever approved by the board dated November 1st, 1977, relating to certain airport-owned property. I'll read in full resolution.
Please.
Okay. Resolution number 21-71, whereas there has been a significant growth at the Greater Rockford Airport Authority, since 1977, and whereas it is in the best interest of the authorities and the Greater Rockford region as a whole that the airport continues to grow and add jobs and more economic growth to the Rockford region, and whereas Greater Rockford Airport Authority has significantly increased its passenger service from 1977 and currently has more than 230,000 travelers passing through its doors each year, and whereas Greater Rockford Airport Authority has grown since 1977 when it had virtually no air cargo traffic to now being ranked as 17th largest airport in the nation for air cargo volume, and whereas Chicago Rockford International Airport, RFD, is one of the largest economic engines for the Rock River Valley and Northern Illinois, home to over 70 businesses, tenants. Current employment on airport totals more than 8,000 skilled jobs in aviation, transportation, logistics, and construction. RFD and its tenants pay millions of dollars in real estate taxes each year that directly fund police, fire, schools, roads, and other necessary governmental services. And whereas RFD and its partners create $4.7 billion in economic impact to the region's economy on an annual basis. RFD and its partners are responsible for 21,476 jobs related to airport activities, providing over $1.4 billion annually in salary and wages. That economic impact will continue to add exponentially with new and future projects, such as the current $50 million air cargo expansion, which is 65% complete, to the region's economic vitality. And whereas among the many projects the airport and its partners have announced and or achieved recently include the construction of this new $50 million international cargo center. Whereas in the past year, RFD and its partners have created over 1,000 new private industry jobs, bringing the total jobs on the airport campus to over 8,000. These jobs represent irreplaceable contributions that directly impact family households and local businesses by billions of dollars each year. And whereas over the past few years, more than $225 million has been invested in infrastructure improvements and facilities at RFD. And whereas the $50 million cargo center expansion is just one part of the airport's ongoing development projects to support its increased cargo activity. The ongoing growth will continue to positively impact the region's economic development and our residents' taxes and return on investment, ROI. And whereas, according to U.S. trade numbers, which tracks and reports different trade markets across the nation, approximately 2.1 billion in import-export products have traveled through RFD during the first 3 quarters of 2021. This is all new business to RFD in the last 18 months. And whereas 15 different international airlines have begun service to and from RFD over the past 6 months and are currently servicing the new International Cargo Center. Flights have grown in the last 18 months from 8 monthly to over 100 monthly. And whereas the construction of the new $50 million cargo expansion project, which is 65% complete, has created hundreds of construction jobs, has generated 200 of the 600 permanent new jobs anticipated at the airport, continues to add growth of the region's strength in worldwide international cargo operations. And whereas the cargo expansion project includes a recently completed 90,000 square foot international cargo center currently being used, designed to accommodate daily multiple aircraft landings and departures containing international import and export freight. An additional 100,000 square foot international cargo facility, which is currently under construction and set to come online next spring. A new airplane ramp to accommodate 6 747 aircraft. A new road that will extend off Cessna Drive to accommodate an anticipated thousands of tractor-trailer traffic monthly to and from the facility. And whereas the land for the first phase of the new international cargo area, $50 million project, is solely owned by the authority and designated for the airport use for expansion of facilities and runways. And whereas it is in the best interest of the authority and the Rockford region for the authority to continue to be an economic engine for the Rockford region. And whereas it has been alleged that a resolution was passed by the Board of Commissioners on November 1st, 1977. And whereas the area which the resolution refers to is necessary for the operation of the airport and the midfield air cargo expansion project. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Commissioners of the Greater Rockford Airport Authority that the resolution dated November 1st, 1977, if it was ever approved by the Board of Commissioners, is hereby repealed and rescinded in its entirety and held for naught.
Thank you. You have a motion?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion on this? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? That resolution passes unanimously.
Motion to approve resolution 21-72, approving a contract with Delta Dental for employee dental insurance for 2022, an amount not to exceed $39,000.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Resolution passes.
Motion to approve resolution 21-73, approving a parking lot lease with Emory Air LLC, Lot F and 10 spaces in the main lot.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Lot F is the parking lot directly to the north of the Emory facility here, just north of the terminal. Lot F has really been an overflow lot that has not been used. Emory has been using it for tractor trailer storage, and we figured they should start paying for that. So we are charging them a land lease, and as part of that land lease now, which is good for the airport, we've agreed to provide them 10 additional reserve spots by their office building.
Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Resolution passes.
Motion to approve resolution 21-74, approving a new net ground lease for aviation plot number 3 to EHJ Holdings LLC. The lease is a 10-year lease with 2 10-year options.
Second.
Motion and a second.
This is to facilitate the sale of a hangar by one of our long-term tenants, Courtesy Aircraft, who will be selling the hangar. And in order to accommodate the financing, we have agreed to redo a land lease and expand it to 3 10-year options, or 1 10-year lease with 2 10-year options. And they are paying the airport a $10,000 fee in order to have that expansion or extension.
Okay. Any further questions on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The resolution passes. Next on the agenda is an executive session, and go going to discuss the sale or lease of property, and, I think we need a roll call vote to close session.
Well, we need the formal motion pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2, 5 and 6, to discuss the sale or lease of property owned by the public body.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. And we need a roll call vote. Mr. Shabowski?
Aye.
Mr. Agnew?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Aye.
Mr. Myers? Chair votes aye, we're in closed session